We are all well aware of the importance of comprehensible input in our classrooms, and to support this, many of us use stories as a way to do it. So, do you use short stories, novels, or graphic novels, or comprehensible CI readers with your students? Well, I'm excited to see that so many teachers are using and leveraging texts with their students. Now, I want to take this a step further in this episode and tell you about a project that engages students creatively with story details and newly acquired vocabulary and structures. So, let's jump in. Are you a language teacher looking for some reassurance that what you're doing in the classroom is on the right track? Or maybe you're looking for some ways to teach even more effectively. If you're one or the other or somewhere in between, you've landed in the right place. This is the World Language Classroom Podcast with your host, me, Joshua Cabral. You're about to get tips, tools, and resources so that your students continue to rise in proficiency and communicate with confidence. Let's jump in. Vamos, allons-y. Hello, my friends. Bonjour, mes amis. Hola, mis amigos. Welcome to the World Language Classroom Podcast. I am Joshua Cabral, and as always, I have to start by saying thank you so much for taking the time to listen to a podcast about language teaching, to think about your own teaching, to bring it back to your classroom. Just one of the many things that I know that you do that makes you such an effective teacher. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your week to do this. So this week, I want to make sure that you go away with a tangible activity that you can do with your students. And I want to share this with you because I have done it with my own students many times, and they very much enjoy it, and they look forward to it each time we read a new story. Now, this is something that you can do with a short story that you're reading or a longer text if you are reading an actual novel written in the target language at an AP level or a higher level. That is wonderful as well. Or if you are using CI readers with your students. I find that this will work better if it is an ongoing story with at least, say, 10 chapters, 10 to 20 chapters, but you can use it with a more advanced story. But if it is a little less, you might have to modify it a bit if it's a shorter story. But how I will explain it to you is based on essentially using a CI reader, a comprehensible reader, that has probably about 10, 15, 20 chapters. So as you're listening through, think about how you could actually use it with the stories that you're doing in your class. But just know that the examples I will be giving and this sort of process for putting it together is based on using CI readers. So this project is what I refer to as Unpack the Book. And if you follow me on social media, you probably have seen that I've been posting about this lately with pictures and everything. So it's great that you're hanging out here with me today because you can hear about it in more detail and the things that I like to do with it. But essentially, this is a creative and very interactive way for students to engage pretty deeply with the story that they're reading. And there is a whole process for what they're doing as they are reading the book, as they are doing activities in the classroom, reading it independently, doing group reading, whatever you're doing in the classroom as you're reading the book. This is a process for how they are maintaining their understanding and keeping sort of a log of what's happening as they go. And then when they finish the book, I will show you what they're going to do with it with this whole project at the end. But it's not just what happens at the end, but it's how they are maintaining their interest and engagement with the book as they go through and the entire story. So I'm going to give you the details for putting this together with concrete tips for implementing this whole project in your language classroom. And this can go for any book that you're doing. This can go for any language that you're teaching and any level. So it's easily adaptable to do that. And the focus is really keeping students engaged and maintaining their language proficiency and going higher with their proficiency in very creative ways. So this whole project involves students essentially creating a book, a mini book, where they summarize and explore key elements of the story within the novel that they are reading. So the final product is, as I said, very creative, but it's also reflective of their understanding of the story of the CI reader that they are engaging with. So it's not just a simple surface level understanding, and in much more personal ways as they are engaging personally with the story. So, as I typically do when I share a new activity with you, I want to point you to a blog post about it because this is a very visual product that students are going to produce in the end. And so, if you go to my blog post, you can see examples of the different stories that my own students have done and what their Unpack the Book project looks like. So, if you go to wlclassroom.com/unpackthebook, so wlclassroom.com/unpackthebook, or you can go right to the show notes where I have the link. So you can go right there and see exactly what it's going to look like. But even more than that, I have a PDF download with templates. And the template that you can download to do this is in a number of different languages. So you can go right to wlclassroom.com/unpackthebook, or you can just click on the link in the show notes. But I'm going to talk through this. The blog post also has the process of how to do it, along with all the visuals and the template that you can download. So as you are beginning a new book, I like to provide students with a handout. It usually ends up being a packet of about 5 to 6 pages where I have them keep a log of the story as we're going through. Now, you're going to have them do lots of activities, speaking activities, writing activities as you're going through, as they are focusing on key vocabulary and discussing the novel's context and having them make predictions about the plot, all the different things that you can do to help students in their understanding of it. But what I have them do as well is maintain their personal reading log as they're going through. And this just means that I give them a document, and for each chapter, it has 3 different sections. And they can usually do 3 chapters on one page. So if you double-side it and you have 15 to 20 chapters, it's not all that much paper. They could also do this digitally. You can have them do it on a Google Doc, and you can just maintain that through Google Classroom. But just having them have a log of each chapter as they go through. So the 3 parts to each chapter, the first thing they do is the characters. So they should note the main characters that are in each chapter. Now, for a lower proficiency level, I'll just have them put the character names. But if they're a higher proficiency level, they may write something along with the character that they do of note in that chapter to sort of remind them what happened. But the first thing is just maintaining that list of who is in this chapter. Then the second section is a short summary. So I have students write 2 to 3 sentences to summarize the chapter. Now, for lower proficiency levels, these will be rather simple sentences of just saying what happens. If it is a more advanced book, if you are actually reading an authentic book that's written in the target language for readers of the target language in a more advanced level, like say AP or a level 4, you could have students write a little more elaborate summaries of each chapter. So that's going to depend on the proficiency level of your class. And then the last part, this is what works particularly well for more novice to lower intermediate students, is I have them create a hashtag for the chapter. And that hashtag really defines the main idea or emotion or takeaway from the chapter. And this is where students get really clever as they are trying to figure out what would be that thing that I could pull away from this, or what's something that happens in there. Or maybe there's something that a character says and they want to use that because it really defines that chapter. So for each chapter, they are making sure that they are tracking who are the characters, and then there's a short summary depending on the proficiency level of your class. That can be 2 sentences or more, and then the hashtags. And you can have them write 1 hashtag or 2 or 3, whatever you would like. Sometimes I'll have them do 5 just so they can have some different ways of looking at it. But characters, short summaries, and then the hashtags. And this is as you're going through the novel, and then students are going to be using these details when they get to the final product at the end. So once you have finished the book and you maybe have done a final assessment, students have done some speaking and writing about the book, or you could do this before they take their final assessment as a way to really pulling together all of the details. So I actually prefer to do this before they do a final assessment because it's an opportunity for them to really personally attach themselves to the details and the vocabulary and the structures to really prepare them for the final writing or speaking assessment that they might do on the book. So again, this is based on reading a CI novel that would be 10, 15, 20 chapters long. And there are a number of pages, and when you download the template, you will see that essentially just each page has a title. And it's up to the students to get clever and creative with what they put on each page. So the first thing is a cover. So you'll see examples in the blog post of the book Zénix that I read with students, and she is a graffiti artist in Senegal. So you'll see that on a number of the covers, they put pictures of Zénix or her actual graffiti. You could have students draw pictures here if they're very creative. I also allow students to print out pictures and then glue them on the front. Students could do this project digitally, but I actually find they get more creative and they actually enjoy the tactile part of creating the book and being able to, sort of pen to paper, pencil to paper, marker to paper, and get creative that way in a way that when they're doing it digitally, it just doesn't come out as interesting for the most part. So for something like this Zénix book, they were printing out pictures of her graffiti or recreating her graffiti or pictures of her. So on the cover, you want students to explore cultural and artistic elements as well as the cover design that they are pulling together. And they want it also to be a representation of what the story's about, what is the main thing that happens in the book that they would want to remember or they think it's important to highlight on the cover. Now, this isn't a place where they're going to do any writing for the most part. This is more just a cover, which is going to be a picture. So then the first page is the vocabulary page. And here I have students list 20 new words. You can have them do 30, however many you want. I just don't like it to go too overboard with the number. So I have them do a list of 20 new words that they learned from the book. And at a lower proficiency level, I'll have them do it with the English translation. At a higher proficiency level, you can have students write the description of what it means in the target language as well. So this is to highlight the importance of integrating these new words into their vocabulary, into their repertoire of the vocabulary they have for your target language. And I ask students to make sure that they're using words that they have learned from the text, that they use regularly when we're talking about it, when they're learning about it, when they are writing a summary, when they are answering questions, rather than just going through the book or going through their handouts and finding new words that they learned. It's sort of what are 20 words that you are using regularly as we talk about this story that you probably didn't know before we started. And if you are truly engaging students in the story as you're going along and they're doing a lot of activities with them, they'll be able to list probably 50 to 100 new words. So when they do that and they start listing them, and sometimes we'll even do it as an activity together where we list them on the board, they will realize they have so many to choose from. So I'll say, no, just choose 20. Some will want to put more and I'll allow that, but 20 is the kind of the good number that has worked well for me with these students. And it's the essential words that they think are necessary to truly understand and then to discuss and write about the story. But again, have them choose ones that they can just come up with rather than having to look back at the story. So the next page is the hashtag page. And what I have them do here is I just have them list the chapters. So if there are 20 chapters, just 1 through 20. If there are 15, 1 through 15. And for each one, I have them choose one hashtag to describe what the chapter was. So this encourages students to distill like the essence of each chapter into a single memorable phrase or maybe even a word. And as they were going through, I mentioned as we were reading that sometimes I'll have them do one hashtag, sometimes up to 5. But for the purposes of creating this book project at the end, they just choose one hashtag that is truly representative of that chapter. Then the next page is the characters. And here I have students write descriptions of the main characters. And this is going to encourage students to really explore character development throughout all of their descriptions of them and their summaries, and as they talked about the characters in each chapter. So here you could tell them which characters to do, or you could have them choose up to 5 or 8, however many are in your story, and have them not just describe who the character is in the story and sort of where they're from, how old they are, where they live, but their development throughout the story. Like, what do they learn? Where did they go? What was the dilemma that they faced? How did they overcome it? So just having those descriptions in there that are just more than base level, that it actually has to do with having understood what their role was in the story from beginning to end. And as students are creating all of these pages, whether it is the hashtags, whether it's the vocabulary, or talking about the characters, what I don't want students to do is to just make a list of writing on the paper. Like, here are the characters, here are the hashtags. But I encourage them to get really creative with what these pages look like. They can do it in different formats. They can do it as a list if they want, but then have them do it in different colors. Or they could create a picture and put all of these sentences within the picture, but just to get creative so it's not just a list on the page. And if you look at the examples in the blog post that I referenced, I show you some of the examples of what my own students have done with it, because it's an opportunity for them to get creative. And many of them get creative within the details and the culture of the story. So again, you can take a look at those in the blog post, which is at wlclassroom.com/unpackthebook, or the link is right in the show notes. So now the next page is the events page. So here I have students write a summary of 3 or maybe 4 major events in the book. And this is where students will describe, identify, and concisely describe pivotal moments in the story. Now, this is not an opportunity to just take sentences from the book and say what happened, but I kind of narrow it down to 3 or 4 major events so that they have to pull from 2 or 3 chapters, perhaps, and then write the summary from that. And again, on this page, get creative in terms of how they're doing that. And this will also depend on the proficiency level of your class. If they are novice, high, intermediate, low reading these books, they'll probably have about 3 to 4 sentences for each major event. But if you have a higher proficiency level class, intermediate, mid to high, up through those AP levels, students can write in much more details. They could also do it in the past tense, whereas the more novice level students will be doing it in the present tense. And then the next page is the quotes page. And this is where I have students write 5 quotes from the book along with the character's name who said it. And this is a direct quote from the book. And here I suggest that students choose quotes that have a significant impact on their understanding of the novel's themes. Now, at a more novice level, I'll just have them do the quotes with the name of the person. And if you have a more advanced group of students, you can have them do the quote with their own description of why they think this is a pivotal part of understanding the story or what the character was trying to say here. Now, when I'm talking about the quotes here, this isn't sort of the prose, the descriptions of things that are happening, but actual dialogue from the book that comes up that characters have said. And then the last page is the culture page. Now, so many times when we're reading these CI novels or reading short stories, the idea of culture is embedded within there. So here I like students to take 2 or 3 cultural elements that are connected to the story, to the book. And this highlights the importance of understanding and reflecting on the cultural context within their understanding of the story. And this is an ideal opportunity for students to really put their ideas of their understanding of things that are happening within that cultural context, because it's likely that there's not something very specific that they can pull from the book, but they could see, oh, okay, I'll reference back to Xenix that I mentioned earlier, where students were writing a lot about cultural elements of Senegal that they learned. And that's not what the story was about, but it was about a character who lives in Senegal. And she's also talking a lot about what it was like and what it continues to be like to be a young woman trying to break into this world of graffiti art. And what does that mean to be a female doing that? What does that mean to be in an urban area doing that? So there are lots of cultural elements that students can pull from these different books. So a quick recap of the pages. And remember, as students are going through, it's good to have them keep that running list of who the characters are, some of the summaries of the different chapters, as well as keeping those hashtags going as they read throughout so they don't have to go back and do them. But once they have all that, when they actually do the project, there is the cover page where they're going to have a visual representation of what the book is. Then there's the vocabulary page where they're going to have about 20 words and at the proficiency level that they are at. So if they're novice level, I would just have them do the target language and their native language, but then more descriptive elements could be involved if the students are at a higher proficiency level. Then there is the page for hashtags. And at the more novice level, I will just have them do the hashtags for each chapter. But if you have a more advanced class, they could perhaps then also describe or write why they chose that hashtag or why it pertains to that chapter. Then there's the page on the characters with the descriptions of the characters. And again, you could tell students which characters to do or have them choose their own that they find are most pivotal to understanding the story. And again, how elaborate those descriptions are will depend on the proficiency level of your class. And then there's the page with the major events that happen in the book, and that'll depend, again, on the proficiency level of your class. If they are more novice level students, it'll be 3 or 4 events that have a description of 3 to 4 sentences, but then your more advanced students will have much more elaborate descriptions of events that happened. Then there's the page with quotes, and I have students do 5 quotes, but that's just my choice. You could do more or less, but these are actual quotes that characters have said in the book. More novice level students are just putting the quotes with the person, and more advanced students can do a description of why they chose that quote and what it means. And then the final page is about the culture, and this entails 2, 3, maybe 4 cultural events that are connected to the book. This could include photos, this could include students drawing pictures as well, but what are the cultural elements that come up in the book that are connected to the story? So once the book is done, we want to look at some sort of assessment or reflection piece, and you could decide if you want students to do drafts of each page in terms of writing about the characters and the events, any of that, or you can just use this as the actual assessment with what students create is what you are going to grade. So I would suggest having an assessment criteria that has a rubric, which includes creativity, as well as the accuracy of their language use and the depth of engagement with the story throughout the novel. As they are doing this, they're spending a lot of time on really reflecting on the individual pieces. So you want that to come up in your rubric, their understanding of the story as it's represented in this project, and not just focusing on the accuracy of the language. That should be a part of the rubric, but just remember that this is an opportunity for them to really dive into the story. So we want to use this as a way of assessing their understanding, their interpretive piece, rather than just the output piece here in the presentational writing. I would also encourage you to have students reflect on their own process and to write about what they learned from the project and how it deepened their understanding of the novel. And more novice level students could do this in their native language, whereas more advanced level students, this could be a very effective supplementary writing piece where they are writing in the target language about how their engagement in this project helped them to better understand the story or things that they discovered about the story through doing this particular activity. Now, once this is all done and you've done your assessment and students have their books, they're so wonderful, they're so creative that I always like to do a little more. So you could have students present their completed books to the class, such as through classroom presentations or a gallery walk, just so that students can have an opportunity to see each other's work. You may put in a discussion piece to this. You could have students working in small groups, maybe groups of 2 or 3 or 4, where they're presenting their books to each other, and they can sort of have that discussion of which quotes did you put in? Oh, I put that same quote in, or oh, I didn't think of that quote. That's a really interesting quote, or the events that happened, or the vocabulary that they put in, and just sort of do that comparison. You could have a grade attached to this where they are keeping track of their different discussions about this or the things that they're coming up with. But I find that in these moments, it's really just an opportunity for students to have pride in their work and then to be able to talk about it and do those discussions with each other as well. So that is the Unpack the Book project. And just remember that it's pretty essential that you have students keep track as they're reading the book of things like the characters, the summaries, and the hashtags, so that they have that to go back and reference when they're doing the book, so they're not going back and doing all that work as well as trying to create the Unpack the Book project. So I really encourage you to try this out and take a look at the examples that are in the blog post. And it also has all of the pages and what's on them written out for you. So in case you're listening to this in a place where you didn't take the notes or can't take the notes as you're listening, if you go to the blog post, which is at wlclassroom.com/unpackthebook, or you have the link right in the show notes, you'll have right there in the blog post is the description of all the different steps along with pictures of what the final product looks like. But I will tell you that once students do this with one story, they are going to look forward to doing it in the future and doing it with other books because it's such a creative way for them to engage with the story. So be sure to check out the show notes where you will see a link to sign up for Talking Points, my weekly email newsletter with tips and resources for language teaching. And remember, there are also links there if you want to get in touch with me so that we can work together. And we can do that either in person in your school or we can do that remotely. Well, I will talk to you soon. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to the World Language Classroom podcast. Be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening so that you never miss an episode. Let's keep the conversation going on social media. Connect with me on X, aka Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at WL Classroom. And for even more valuable resources, visit my website, wlclassroom.com, where you'll find over 300 blog posts about language teaching. So stay inspired, keep growing, and continue making a difference in your language classroom.